You have been losing, not because you are weak, not because you lack talent or effort, because nobody gave you the real rules. They gave you the version that keeps people manageable. Work hard, be honest, be fair, and the world will recognize it. You believed it, right up until someone less prepared. Then you walked out of a room with what you came for. You felt it, in your chest. That specific confusion of doing everything right and still losing. Not anger. Something worse. The quiet shame of someone who cannot explain to themselves how it happened. The real explanation is this. Someone else in that room was operating from a completely different set of rules. Rules they never taught you. Rules that have existed for 500 years. Rules that a man was imprisoned and tortured for writing down. There is one principle inside what Machiavelli wrote that his publishers refused to print, that scholars argued should be destroyed, that the people who understood it kept entirely to themselves. It explains every loss you could not explain. We are getting there. But first, who was this man? Because almost everything you think you know about him is wrong. Machiavelli did not write from a throne. He wrote from a farm in exile after they took everything from him. The Medici accused him of conspiracy. They dragged him to prison. They used the strappado, wrists tied behind his back, hoisted, dropped, 4 times, until his shoulders nearly tore apart. He did not confess. There was nothing to confess. They released him. He went to a farm. Every morning he worked the fields. Every evening he changed out of his mud-covered clothes and put on his formal robes, the clothes of the man he used to be. And he sat at his desk and wrote. He wrote because he had spent 40 years watching good people lose to worse people for reasons nobody would say out loud. What he wrote down is what we are going through now, starting with the one that costs people the most. The cold eye. The most expensive mistake you make about people is seeing them as you want them to be, not as they are. Your colleague bent the truth 3 times. You explained it away. Your friend disappeared when you needed them. You gave another chance. You paid for it every single time. Machiavelli observed it simply. At the moments that matter, when something real is on the table, self-interest is the dominant force in almost every human being, not because people are evil. Because people are human, watch what people do, not what they say. Words cost nothing, behavior under pressure, when honoring a commitment actually costs something. That is where character lives or dies. 1 incident is an accident, 2 is coincidence, 3 is a pattern. A pattern is a person telling you the truth about themselves. Believe them. Your feelings about someone are not evidence of who that person is. They are evidence of who you want that person to be. The gap between those 2 things is exactly where the losses happen. See people as they are, not as you need them to be. This single shift will save you more than anything else in this video. Respond. Never react. Every day someone will try to pull a reaction out of you. And the moment it happens, you feel it. In your chest. A heat. An automatic impulse to fire back. That impulse is the trap. Not because defending yourself is wrong. Because they built their move around your reaction. Your reaction was not an inconvenience to them. It was the entire point. Machiavelli called this the trap of predictability. When your opponent knows how to make you move, They do not need to be stronger. They only need to know which direction you will go. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who cannot be predicted. No trap can be set for someone whose next move is completely unknown. Between what happens to you and what you do about it, there is a space. That space is everything. In negotiations, the side that shows urgency first always concedes the most. In confrontations, whoever escalates first loses the moral high ground. In competition, whoever reveals their strategy early loses the only advantage patience would have protected. Train the pause. The person who masters the space between what happens and what they do about it has mastered the only game that determines everything else. Information is the only real advantage. If this is naming something you have lived, stay with me. The hidden principle is coming. You need this foundation first. Knowledge is power. Wrong. Knowledge that the other person does not know you have. That is power. Ask questions. Do not make statements. The person who talks constantly reveals their priorities, their anxieties, their limits in every sentence. The person who asks precise questions learns everything while giving away almost nothing. In every exchange, the listener holds more real information than the talker. Observe before you engage. Resist the pressure to establish yourself quickly. Watch first. Learn who actually influences outcomes versus who simply has the title. Then engage with a map nobody else possesses. Know more than they think you know. Show less than you actually possess. This asymmetry is worth more than any title, credential, or advantage you were ever handed. Consistency builds what talent never will. The people who build things that last are almost never the most talented. They are the most consistent. In the small moments, when no one important is watching, when holding the standard is harder than letting it slip, motivation rises and falls. Discipline does not. Talent is a ceiling. Consistency is an engine. And an engine, given enough time, will always go further than a ceiling is high. Trust nobody equally. Most people do not have a trust problem because they trust too little. They trust indiscriminately. Equal access. Equal vulnerability. To people who have offered completely different levels of proof they deserve it. Trust is not a moral stance. It is a resource. Distribute it accordingly. Sharded history is not loyalty. Loyalty is what someone does when betraying you would have been easier. Most people you trust have never been in that position. You do not actually know what they would do. The one they hid. I told you, at the beginning, there was something Machiavelli wrote that the publishers refused to print, that scholars argued should be destroyed, that the people who understood it kept entirely to themselves. Here it is. The game is decided before it begins. Not in the moment of opportunity, in the months and years before the moment arrives. Every year the flood comes to the same valley. The man who built on the hill, because he studied the pattern, because he acted before the water rose, is completely fine. The man who built in the floodplain, because it was easier, loses everything. Both men face the exact same flood. The only difference is where they were standing when it arrived. This is the principle they kept hidden, not because it is complicated, because it exposes how much of what looks like luck is actually preparation, that happened long before the moment became visible. The people who benefit most from the myth of luck are the people who had already positioned themselves and did not want you to understand why they kept winning. You are not losing because the game is rigged. You are losing because you are building in the floodplain, while someone else quietly built on the hill before anyone noticed the water rising. Every day, where do I want to be standing in 1 year? What is the one move I make today to get there? Small, precise, directional. Done consistently, this becomes a position that nobody else thought to occupy early enough. Write one word in the comments. The word that names what you now see that you could not name before. Keep watching. The strategic retreat. The proudest people lose the most. Not because pride makes them fight harder, because pride makes them fight every battle. The commander who meets every challenge with maximum force exhausts his resources on conflicts that decide nothing. He wins battles and loses wars through accumulated depletion. Not every challenge requires your energy. Not every room is worth the cost of proving yourself inside it. Ego asks, am I winning this argument? Strategy asks, does winning this argument serve what I am actually building? Almost nobody asks the second one. The person who can hold ground and step back with equal comfort is more formidable than any person who only knows one mode. The long game. Most people make decisions based on what eliminates today's discomfort fastest. This is why most people's lives look identical year after year. The long game accepts today's difficulty deliberately, in exchange for a position that only today's difficulty can build. Trade today's comfort for tomorrow's position without hesitation. The person who consistently chooses today's ease is building a smaller life and will not fully understand why until it is built. The unstoppable identity. Everything comes back to this. A version of yourself that external circumstances cannot determine. Most people's confidence is weather dependent. When things go well, they feel powerful. When things turn, they collapse. At exactly the moment when clear thinking matters most. The unstoppable identity runs on internal conditions, your standards, your word to yourself, your clear understanding of what you are building and why. Not from what the current situation is offering or withholding. It is built in the small moments. The quiet morning, when nothing external is watching and holding the standard is harder than letting it slip. When it is fully built, the challenges that used to shake you stop shaking you. The doubt that used to make you hesitate loses its grip. You become genuinely difficult to stop, not because nothing hits you. Because the person meeting that difficulty is not the person who used to flinch. That person was built differently, in the moments nobody saw. Go back to that feeling in your chest from the beginning, the confusion of losing when you should have won. You understand it now. The person who beat you was not smarter, not more talented, not more deserving. They were operating from a different set of rules, rules that a man endured torture to write down. That the people who benefited most from others, not knowing them, worked very hard to keep buried. Those rules are yours now. The cold eye, the calculated pause, the information advantage, the consistency, the economy of trust. The positioning that happens before the moment arrives. The strategic retreat, the long game, the identity that does not collapse when the world pushes against it. These are not ideas, they are instruments, and you now know how to use them. Until you see the forces operating around you, you will keep experiencing their effects and calling them bad luck. You have seen them now. You cannot unsee them. The world has always operated this way. The only thing that changed today is that now you can see it, and a person who sees what everyone else cannot see does not play the same game as everyone else. They play a different game entirely, building something the people who kept you uninformed will eventually find very difficult to explain. Tell me in the comments which of the 9 hit closest to home. Not in general, the specific one that named something you lived through without understanding it. Until now, share this with one person who keeps losing ground they should be holding and cannot figure out why. Not as a warning, as a gift. Because what comes next goes deeper into the hidden forces shaping your decisions, your relationships, and your reality. The forces you have been living inside without knowing they were there.